The night I drove across town to return my ex's things, I figured on a 5-minute handoff, one stiff goodbye, and the clean relief of finally being done with it. Instead, her roommate opened the door barefoot in an oversized gray sweater, mascara smudged under one eye, my ex's apartment key still in her hand, and she looked at the box in my arms and said, "She's gone." I just stared at her. "What do you mean, gone?" Callie stepped aside far enough that I could see past her into the apartment, and half the living room had been stripped bare. The framed prints were off the walls. The little white shelf that used to lean under the window was gone. So was the green armchair Bianca bought, because she said it made the room feel like somewhere in Europe, which was funny, because it came from a clearance aisle 2 towns over and squeaked every single time anyone sat down. My ex had disappeared from that apartment with the same quiet efficiency she'd used to disappear from us. Callie watched my face, not cruelly, just carefully. "She moved out this morning," she said. I shifted the box against my chest. "She knew I was coming tonight." "I know. She texted me yesterday." "I know. She said 7 o'clock. Callie nodded once. "I know. There are moments when the humiliation shows up slowly, like your brain is handing your pride a few extra seconds to clear out before the rest of it arrives, and this was one of those. My name is Jesse Hart. I was 34, a licensed electrician running small residential jobs around a rainy mid-sized town where it never fully stopped drizzling, and I'd spent the last 2 weeks packing Bianca's leftovers into one cardboard box, because apparently dignity after a breakup means returning a curling iron, 2 sweaters, a cookbook she never once opened, and a framed photo of the 2 of us at a wedding, where we were already smiling through a lie. Bianca and I had been together almost 20 months, long enough to build routines, not long enough to survive the truth. The truth was plain. She liked being loved a good deal more than she liked loving anyone back. I didn't see it at first. At first, I told myself she was guarded, busy, complicated, a woman with ambition and taste, and a talent for making every room feel like a place I had to earn my way into. Then I started noticing how often I apologized when I hadn't done a thing wrong, how often our plans bent because her mood bent, how often I left her place feeling like I'd auditioned for the part of boyfriend and blown the call back. Callie had been there for most of it, never in the middle of it, never that, just the roommate who opened the door when Bianca ran late. She was the one who handed me coffee once, after Bianca forgot we had dinner and stayed out with coworkers instead. She was the one who said, real quiet, "You don't have to wait out in the hall," offering me shelter from more than the weather. Callie was nothing like Bianca. Bianca walked into a room, expecting it to rearrange itself around her. Callie came in quiet and noticed the things everybody else walked right past. She worked odd hours as a vet tech in an emergency animal clinic, painted small watercolor birds on her days off, and had a dry, soft way of talking that made even sarcasm sound like it had washed its hands first. The first real conversation we ever had, Bianca was 40 minutes late and not picking up, and Callie found me sitting on the front steps of their building, flowers in my lap like some walking advertisement for misplaced hope. "She's probably still out of drinks," she said. I looked up. "That obvious?" "The flowers are losing their nerve." I laughed because I didn't know what else to do, and she sat 2 steps above me, keeping a careful distance, and after a minute she said, "For what it's worth, they're nice flowers. She likes peonies." She says she likes peonies. Callie shrugged. "She throws them out after 2 days because they drop petals." That should have told me more than it did. Over the months, Callie became the person I trusted almost by accident, only in small ways. A 5-minute talk while Bianca finished getting ready, a shared look when Bianca made a joke that cut a little too close, a quiet drive safe when I left after another night where I'd said far less than I'd felt. Nothing crossed a line, not once, and honestly that was the part that stayed with me, because sometimes holding back builds more between 2 people than any betrayal ever could. Then Bianca broke up with me in a restaurant. Not with any drama, just waited until the appetizers were cleared, which struck me as both cold and weirdly efficient, and told me she needed a life that didn't feel so heavy. I asked her what that even meant. She said, "You're a good man, Jesse, but you want everything to matter." I remember looking at her across that little table and realizing she thought that was a flaw in me. The next morning, Callie sent me one line, just, "I'm sorry." You deserved a better exit than that. I stared at that message a long time. Then I deleted the thread, because keeping it felt like standing too close to an open flame. Now here I was, 2 weeks later, in the doorway with her leftovers in a box, and Callie looked like she hadn't slept in a week. What happened? I asked. She leaned a shoulder against the frame. She got a sublet clear across the country. Some artist loft in the desert. She didn't mention any loft. She didn't mention the movers either. I looked past her again, and the apartment felt wounded somehow, not empty exactly, more like somebody had carried off all the loud parts and left the quiet ones standing there. Did she leave you holding the lease? Callie's expression shifted small, but I caught it, and that was when a mascara and the sweater and the key in her hand all clicked into place. She did, I said. Callie looked away. It's handled. That means it isn't. That means you're pretending it is. I set the box down just inside the door. Callie. She flinched a little at her name, not because I said it hard, but because I said it like I knew her, and maybe I did, and maybe that was the whole problem. She told me to give you this, she said, holding out an envelope. I took it. My name sat on the front in Bianca's neat, careful handwriting, and inside was a note. 3 sentences. Jesse, I decided it would be kinder not to do another goodbye. Leave my things with Callie. I hope you find someone who wants the same heavy little life you do. I read it twice, then folded it carefully, because tearing it in half would have looked like I still wanted an audience. Callie watched me. I'm sorry, she said. I looked up at her, and the strangest thing about that whole night wasn't that Bianca had left, it was that I felt less abandoned standing in front of the woman she'd left behind. Callie wrapped her arms around herself. You don't have to head off right away, she said. The hallway seemed to pull in tighter around us. What? She looked embarrassed the second it was out, like she'd said more than she'd meant to. I mean, it's pouring out there, and you hauled that box halfway across town, and I just made a pot of coffee because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. A faint, worn-out smile touched her mouth. She's gone, Jesse. Then softer. You can stay. I should have left. That was the right answer, the sensible one. A man with any sense sets the box inside the door, hands off the last ugly little chores of a dead relationship, and drives home to sit with his humiliation in private. Instead, I stood there holding Bianca's note, while Callie waited in the doorway in that oversized gray sweater, looking like somebody who'd been abandoned so quietly she was still working out whether she was even allowed to call it pain. Rain rattled the fire escape outside. Somewhere above us, a neighbor's TV mumbled through the ceiling. I looked at the box on the floor. She left you the whole lease. Callie gave a small laugh. You say that like repeating it makes it less stupid. Does it? No. How much is left on it? 4 months. I stared at her. She moved across the country and left you 4 months of rent. She paid part of next month. That's not generous. That's evidence. Callie's mouth almost curved. Almost. Then she rubbed a hand over her face and stepped back into the apartment. Come inside before I feel worse about offering coffee to my ex-roommate's ex-boyfriend in a hallway. That sentence should have sent me home. It didn't. I picked up the box and followed her in. The apartment felt different without Bianca's things in it. Smaller, but not worse. The spot by the window where the squeaky green chair used to sit was empty now. A rectangle of cleaner paint marked where a framed print had hung. On the coffee table sat one mug, a folded lease, a calculator, and a notepad covered in Callie's careful handwriting, columns of numbers that clearly hadn't gone her way. She caught me looking. Don't judge the math, she said. It's been through a lot tonight. I'm judging the person who caused the math. That's fair. I set the box against the wall. You want me to take that somewhere else? No. I'll ship it once. She sends an address. She didn't leave one. She left an email. Callie walked into the kitchen. Very modern, very useless. I followed as far as the doorway. The kitchen was small, a bare bulb throwing yellow light over the sink, a kettle just starting steam on the stove, and Callie moved through it careful and deliberate, like if she kept her hands busy enough the rest of her might not come apart. And I knew that exact way of moving because I'd been using it for 2 weeks. She reached for a mug, then stopped. Coffee. Yes. You don't have to say yes just because I offered. I know. You can leave right after. I know that too. She looked at me then, and the room shifted Not romantic. Not yet. More dangerous than that, because it was honest. Two people left behind by the same woman, standing in the kitchen, sheet abandoned. Both of us pretending coffee was a normal response to any of it. Callie turned away first. She poured, then reached up into the cabinet above the stove for the sugar, and her hand stopped halfway. "There's something taped in here," she said. She peeled it loose and turned it over, a folded sheet of notebook paper, her name written on the outside in Bianca's neat hand. She unfolded it, and I watched her read, and I watched something in her face go very still. "What is it?" She didn't answer right away. She just handed it to me, and I read it standing under that bare yellow bulb. It was a list, a to-do list written to Callie in Bianca's careful print. "Water the plants. They're yours now. Mail my box when Jesse drops it Friday at 7. Be nice to him. He'll probably want to sit a while. So let him. He needs the closure, and I told him it was fine to stay. Don't make it weird. Tell the landlord we're both moving out at the end of the term." I read it twice. Then I looked up at Callie, and neither of us said anything for a long moment, because it was all there in her handwriting, cold and organized, the whole evening scripted before it happened. "She planned this," Callie said finally, very quiet. And all at once the apartment didn't feel abandoned anymore. It felt staged. Callie took the note back from me and read it again, then again, like the words might turn less insulting if she stared them down hard enough, but they didn't. "Be nice to him. He needs the closure. Don't make it weird. Tell the landlord we're both moving out." There was almost something impressive about Bianca's talent for leaving a whole state behind and still rearranging the emotional furniture from 2,000 miles off. "That's why she told me to trade my shift," Callie said. "She what?" "She messaged me this afternoon. Said maybe I should get someone to cover tonight, because you were coming by and might be a mess, and she didn't want me walking in on it after work. She set the note on the counter with too much care. She made it sound like she was worried about me." I stared at her. "She told you to be here, and told me to come at 7. "Yes." "And moved out before either of us showed." "Yes." The kitchen went quiet, not the romantic kind, the ugly kind, the quiet that shows up when two people realize they weren't just hurt by the same person, they were arranged by her. Callie walked to the window and stood looking out at the rain blurring the streetlights, her reflection pale in the glass, the half-emptied room floating behind her. "I feel stupid," she said. "You're not. I gave up my shift because she said you'd need someone." She laughed once, no humor in it all. "That's the part that got me. Not the lease, not the rent. You." She knew I'd care enough to stay. That one landed different because it wasn't only about being used, it was about being seen in the worst possible way, Bianca noticing Callie's kindness and reaching for it like a spare key. I looked at the box on the floor, her sweaters, her curling iron, her note, her unfinished chores stacked neat in cardboard, and then I said, "We shouldn't answer her tonight." Callie turned. "What?" No text back. No email back. No defending ourselves to the person who built this whole mess, then wrote a note asking us not to make it weird. Her tired face softened a little. "That sounds healthy. I'm trying something new. Living dangerously." Very. My phone buzzed against my leg, and I already knew, and I looked at the screen. "Bianca, did you drop off the box? Please don't turn tonight into a whole thing." I stared at it, and Callie read my face. I handed her the phone without thinking it through. She read it, and something in her expression cooled, and then she gave it back. "What are you going to say?" she asked. I typed one line. "Dropped it off. You made it a whole thing when you scripted it in a cabinet." Then I sent it. Callie stared at me. "What? I didn't think you'd actually send that." "Neither did I." Her eyes held mine a beat too long, and then she took a breath and reached for the lease on the coffee table, and the vet tech disappeared for a second, and a woman with a problem to solve stepped into her place. "She's on this lease until the end of the term," Callie said. "She can leave. She can't just invent a graceful exit and hand me 4 months of rent, plus a note telling me to lie to the landlord for her. You want to call him? Tomorrow, not tonight. Tonight, I want to know exactly what she owes down to the dollar." I moved closer, still leaving space between us. "I'm good with contracts, actually. I read them all day, permits, service agreements, the fine print nobody else wants to. It's not glamorous, but I know how to make a paper trail behave. That almost got me a smile. So we worked. A little before midnight, in my ex's half-emptied apartment, I sat on the floor beside the coffee table, with the woman my ex had left holding the bag, and we added up rent, deposits, the utility splits, and the exact dollar value of Bianca's gift for making other people feel unreasonable for expecting plain decency. It should have been absurd. It was absurd, but it steadied us both. Numbers gave the night edges. The note and the email stopped being wounds and started being evidence. By 1 in the morning, Callie had a clean list. Lease obligation, the unpaid utilities, the furniture she'd hauled off despite them splitting the cost, and written proof in Bianca's own hand that she'd knowingly left without proper notice and told Callie to misrepresent it. Callie stared at the page. I can handle this. I know. She looked at me, worn out but clearer now. You didn't say alone. No. Good. That word went through me quietly, not because it was flirtation, but because it was trust. Have you ever had the person who quietly saw your worst night turn out to be the one you should have been watching all along? Tell me about it in the comments. I'd like to hear it. Then my phone lit up again, and this time it wasn't Bianca. It was my sister Robin. You okay? Bianca posted something weird. I opened the app before I could talk myself out of it. Bianca had put up a photo from an airport lounge, sunglasses, a glass of wine, perfect light, and a caption underneath. Sometimes choosing yourself means leaving behind the people who confuse love with heaviness. New chapter. Desert air. I stared at it. Callie leaned over just far enough to see, and for a second neither of us reacted, and then she whispered, "Wow." That one word carried enough exhaustion to fill the whole room. I closed the app. Callie sat back and hugged her knees. She's already turning it into a story, she said. Yes, and in her story were the heavy things she had to put down. I looked at her, and the apartment was quiet now. Rain and old pipes and the low hum of the fridge, the kind of quiet where people either lie or finally stop. No, I said. In her story were the two people she left before either of us could ask her to be honest. Callie's eyes lifted. That's not the same thing. No, it isn't. She held my gaze a long moment. Then something in her face opened, not all the way, just enough to let the truth underneath show through. I was in love with her once, she said. I went still. She looked down right away. Not while you two were together. Before that, briefly, stupidly, and she knew. I think she liked knowing. Then she brought you around, and I got over it slower than I should have. The room shifted under me. Not jealousy, something more complicated than that, because all at once the kindness and the distance and the carefulness had another layer folded inside it. Callie looked miserable. I didn't tell you because it wasn't yours to carry. I nodded slowly. Thank you, I said. She blinked. For what? For not turning your hurt into mine. Her eyes filled, but she held steady, and then she said, very softly, I think that's why I ended up liking you, before I let myself notice I was doing it. The words settled between us, quiet and impossible to take back, and before I could find anything to say to them, a knock came at the door. We both froze. Another knock. Then a woman's voice out in the hall. Callie, it's Mrs. Nowak. The landlord just phoned me. He says Bianca gave notice that you're clearing out too. Callie's face went pale, and the night found a whole new way to get worse. She opened the door with the color still gone from her cheeks. Mrs. Nowak stood in the hall in a quilted robe, silver hair pinned back, phone in one hand and suspicion in both eyes, the kind of neighbor who knew everyone's business before the mail carrier did. What do you mean, Bianca gave notice? Callie asked. Mrs. Nowak looked past her and saw me sitting on the floor by the coffee table, surrounded by lease papers and Bianca's abandoned box, and her eyebrows climbed. I stood up too fast. This isn't. I am far too old to care what this is, Mrs. Nowak said. I care about rent and locks and people leaving furniture by the dumpster. Callie blinked, and then, despite all of it, she almost laughed. Mrs. Nowak stepped inside without waiting to be asked. Marv called me because he couldn't reach you. Bianca emailed him saying the both of you were vacating at the end of the term. Callie's voice went flat. She what? She said you agreed. I did not agree. I know that. Mrs. Nowak looked around the stripped room. You're a lot of things, dear. Quiet, overworked, hopeless with houseplants. You are not stupid. Callie closed her eyes for half a second, and that small kindness seemed to hit her harder than any insult would have. I reached for the lease. Do you have a landlord's number? Mrs. Nowak looked at me. And you are? I hesitated. Callie answered before I could. He's Jesse. That was all. Not Bianca's ex. Not a problem. Just my name. Mrs. Nowak studied me a second, then handed over the number. He looks angry, she said. I'm trying to be constructive. Men always say that right before they send an email, they regret. Callie actually smiled at that. Good, Mrs. Nowak said. You needed one. The landlord picked up on the third ring, already defensive, a guy named Marv, and inside of 30 seconds, it was clear Bianca had done the thing Bianca always did, handed over just enough information to make herself sound reasonable and everyone else sound difficult. She told me both tenants were leaving, Marv said. Callie stood next to me, shoulders drawn tight. I never said that. She copied you on the email. She copied me after she sent it. Well, I've already got a showing lined up tomorrow afternoon. Callie went very still, and that was the moment I heard her breathing change. Not panic, more like rage, trying hard to stay polite. I held the phone out toward her. She took it. Marv, she said, her voice quiet enough to put an edge on the room. I am on this lease. I have not given notice. I have not agreed to leave, and I have a note in Bianca's own handwriting telling me to tell you otherwise. You do not have permission to show this apartment tomorrow, and if you come in without proper notice or my consent, I will have every bit of this in writing before you finish your morning coffee. Mrs. Nowak smiled like she'd just watched a niece win a spelling bee holding a paring knife. Marv stammered. Callie didn't. She asked him for the full record of his communication with Bianca, requested written confirmation, made it plain that Bianca stayed financially responsible unless she was formally released, and said the words tenant rights with the flat calm of someone who spent her shifts turning panic into steady, simple instructions. By the time she ended the call, the apartment felt different, not safe yet, not fixed, but no longer just handed over. She passed the phone back to me, and I noticed her hand was shaking, and she noticed me noticing. Don't say anything kind, she said. I was going to say that was terrifying. That's acceptable. Mrs. Nowak nodded. Good girl. Callie looked like she might cry again, but she didn't. Instead, she said, I need to email him. Get it in writing before he wakes up and decides he imagined all this. I'll help, I said, then caught myself. If you want. She looked at me, and that difference mattered. I want, she said. Mrs. Nowak left after making Callie promise not to let anyone bully her out of the place. At the door, she looked back at me. You don't make trouble worse, she said. I'll try not to. That is not a promise. No, ma'am. She seemed satisfied by the honesty, and she went. For the next hour, Callie and I built the cleanest email I'd ever helped write. Dates, the lease clauses, screenshots, a photo of Bianca's handwritten note, Callie's plain statement that she never consented, a request for written confirmation, and not one insult, even though a good 3 or 4 of them were earned. When she finally hit send, she leaned back against the couch and stared at the ceiling. I should feel better. You stopped a showing, documented the lie, and made your landlord nervous at 2 in the morning. That's not nothing. It still feels like she keeps reaching into the room from 1,000 miles off. I looked at the box, the sweaters, the curling iron, the note, the whole neat pile of Bianca's talent for turning other people into loose ends, the kind she never bothered to tie. Then I stood, picked the box up, and carried it over to the entryway. Callie sat up. What are you doing? Moving her out of the middle of the apartment. I set it down beside the door, not dramatic, just enough. When I turned around, Callie was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. What? I asked. She always made people orbit her, she said. Yeah, you just moved the planet. I smiled a little. Seemed overdue. The rain had gone soft by then. The place was still half empty, still full of problems, still technically the stage, where my ex had set up one last emotional mess before catching her flight, but Callie didn't look like someone left behind anymore. She looked like someone standing in the wreckage, deciding what part of it belonged to her. I checked the time. It's almost 3. You should get some sleep. The sentence came out on its own, and we both heard the other thing under it. Callie looked down. I didn't mean it like leave. I know. I mean, you can, obviously. You've got a life that doesn't revolve around emergency lease warfare. My schedule's flexible. Small jobs, my own truck. That sounds fake. It's a little fake, but I'm staying anyway if you want me to. Her eyes lifted, and there was again the dangerous plainness of that one word, stay. She stood up slowly. Jesse, I don't want to turn to the person you pick because Bianca hurt you. You're not. You can't know that yet. That was fair. Pain makes anything look like shelter if the light's soft enough. So I didn't step closer. I know this, I said. I felt more actually seen in one bad night with you than I did in 20 months trying to be enough for her. Callie's mouth parted a little. I kept going before the fear could edit me into something safer. And I know I don't want to spend that feeling carelessly. Her eyes filled, but different this time, less wounded, more afraid of hope. I like you before tonight, she whispered. I tried not to. I had good reasons, then bad reasons, then no reasons left except being scared. I looked at her. Callie, I said, if you kiss me tonight, I need it not to be because she left. That was the line, clean and necessary, and she hurt land. I crossed the room slowly and stopped in front of her, close enough to feel the question, not close enough to take the answer. Then I won't kiss you tonight, I said. Her face changed, surprise first, then something softer underneath it. The old me would have closed that distance and called it comfort, and told myself later it was mutual. So instead I touched her hand once, just briefly, and let go. Ask me tomorrow, I said. Callie looked at her hands, then back up at me, and for the first time all night her smile had no apology in it. Stay on the couch, she whispered. I nodded. One couch, one coffee in the morning. Maybe two if the plants look worse, I said. Her mouth curved. They will. Then two. She laughed, quiet, and the sound made the whole apartment feel less abandoned. I slept a few restless hours on that squeaky couch, and a little before dawn I woke to the sound of Callie in the kitchen, standing by the window in the same gray sweater, reading something on her phone, and her face had gone cold again. I sat up. What happened? She turned the screen toward me. A new email from Bianca. I need you both to stop acting like victims. I did what was best for everyone, and honestly the guilt tripping is a lot. Callie looked at me, and this time she wasn't crying. She was done. Tomorrow, she said, we answer properly. She didn't fire back right then, and that was the first sign something had shifted because the old version of that night would have answered inside a minute, defended, explained, try to make Bianca understand the damage, as if understanding had ever once been the missing piece. Instead, Callie set the phone on the table, poured coffee into 2 mugs, and said, I'm going to shower before I write something legally useful instead of just satisfying. That sounds like growth. It feels like heartburn. By 9, we had 3 things ready. A formal note to Marv confirming Callie was not vacating. A separate email to Bianca with the lease obligations laid out and the photo of the cabinet note attached, and a folder of screenshots proving she'd knowingly staged the handoff, misrepresented Callie's consent, and tried to steer the story afterward. Callie sat at the kitchen table in clean jeans, her hair still damp, the gray sweater traded for a navy one that looked a good deal less like surrender. She read the email to Bianca one last time, and it was perfect, no begging, no fury, no emotional courtroom, just the facts. You are still responsible for your share of the lease unless you are formally released. You did not have my consent to give notice. You do not have my consent to use my apartment as the set for your closure. From here on, anything about rent, utilities, or property goes in writing only. At the bottom, she added one line of her own. You left, Bianca. Stop trying to manage the room you walked out of. Then she sent it. For a second, we both just watched the screen. Nothing exploded. No music played. The plants did not revive. But Callie breathed like she'd been holding the same lungful of air since yesterday afternoon. There, she said. I lifted my mug. To legally useful heartburn. She smiled, and then her phone rang, Bianca, and Callie watched it buzz until it went quiet. A minute later mine rang, Bianca, and I declined it. Callie looked at me. You didn't have to. Yes, I said, I did. But I knew Marv had written back in a very different tone. No showing, no vacate notice, no changes without Callie's direct written confirmation, and he confirmed Bianca stayed on the lease unless every party signed a release. By 3, Bianca had sent one long email, then another, then one that opened with, "I'm sorry you both chose to take this so personally," which was so perfectly Bianca that Callie and I looked at each other and laughed at the same time, not because it was funny, but because some people can apologize and keep the knife in their hand the whole time. Callie didn't answer it, and that was the second sign. The third sign came that evening, when Mrs. Nowak knocked and handed Callie a small pot of soup, a stack of tenant rights flyers, and a cutting off one of her own plants. "This one is hard to kill," she said, eyeing the sad row of survivors by the window. "For practice." Callie held the cutting like it was something sacred. After Mrs. Nowak left, I said, "That plant is under a lot of pressure. It knows what it signed up for." I stayed on the couch again that night, and nothing happened that mattered. And in the morning, Callie made coffee, looked at me across the little kitchen, and said, "It's tomorrow." I set my mug down. "So, it is. You said ask you tomorrow." I remember. She walked around the table slowly, not dramatic, not putting on a show, just brave in the quiet way she'd been all along. "If I ask you to kiss me," she said, "it's not because Bianca left. I know. And it's not because the apartment's empty. I know. And it's not because we both got hurt by the same person." I stepped closer. "Then why?" Her eyes held mine. "Because before any of that, I watched you wait on the steps for someone who didn't deserve your waiting, and I wanted so badly to be the one who opened the door and told you to come inside." That was the sentence that ended the old story. So I kissed her, not like a rebound, not like getting even, like two people who'd spent too long being careful around the wrong person, finally allowed to be careful with each other. We didn't turn simple after that. Simple would have been a lie. Callie still had a lease to untangle, and I still had a breakup that had left more bruises than I liked to admit, and Bianca still tried for a while to send emails that sounded gracious, right up until the second paragraph. But the room changed. Callie found a new roommate through a coworker at the clinic she actually trusted. Bianca paid up after Callie sent the documents and mentioned small claims court exactly once in a single flat sentence. The box of her things sat by the door 11 days, until she finally coughed up an address. And when I mailed it, I felt nothing dramatic, no thunderclap of closure, just postage. Callie and I went slow, real dates, not crisis meetings dressed up as intimacy. Coffee after her night shifts. Walked through town when the rain finally let up, which around here felt like a personal favor. Dinner in small places where nobody knew Bianca's name. One afternoon in the park where Callie sketched a sparrow on a napkin and pretended it wasn't beautiful. For months later, she came to my place for the first time, stood in the doorway with takeout in her hands, and said, "Your apartment is very clean for a man with emotional damage." I hired a professional, a therapist, a shop vac. She laughed, and right then I knew I wanted that sound in every room I was ever going to live in. A year later, we moved into a place that was neither hers nor mine, but ours. No ghosts in the corners, no dying plants except the one from Mrs. Nowak, which somehow pulled through and got downright smug about it. 2 years in, Bianca emailed me one last time, no apology in it, just a polished little note saying she hoped we were well and that the desert had taught her a lot about herself. I showed Callie. She read it, handed the phone back, and said, "Good for the desert." Then she watered the plant. That was the last door closing. 3 years after the night I drove across town to return a box, I proposed to Callie in our kitchen while she was painting a tiny watercolor bird at the table. I planned a better speech, of course I had, but she looked up with blue paint on her wrist and those tired eyes and that dry, soft smile that had saved me before I even knew I needed saving. And so I just said, "Stay." She stared at me. Then she saw the ring, and her eyes filled. "You know," she whispered, "that word has caused us a lot of trouble. It also worked." She laughed through the tears and said, "Yes." Years later, when people ask how we met, Callie usually says, "He dated my roommate." I say, briefly, "Unfortunately." Then Callie adds, "He came to return a box." And I look at her and remember the half-emptied apartment, the rain, the coffee, the woman in the gray sweater who opened the door and told me the truth. "She's gone. You can stay." The truth is, I came there to return my ex's things, but what I really handed back that night was the version of myself that kept waiting outside doors where I was never fully wanted. Callie opened one. And this time I stayed. So let me ask you this. What would you have done if you went to return your ex's things and found out she'd left you holding one last emotional mess, one she built on purpose? And have you ever realized, too late or right on time, that the person who quietly saw your pain was the one you should have noticed all along? Tell me your story down in the comments. If this one landed for you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.